Hey everyone, I hope you are all doing well. We started out painting landscapes and learning how to use paint brushes for texture and some new tools. We studied masters to get an idea as to how some of these paintings are put together. A couple of videos ago, during Shark Week, we moved away from landscapes to objects demonstrating form and volume and even lost edges. This week, we'll take another step and look at hard surfaces. So I started getting into Lego builds, and they're quite fun and not just for kids. I actually made a video of my first build, and I'll put that and then link to the description below. And I hope that you check it out. But that's the subject of the painting we're doing this week, a Lego Stormtrooper. Should be fun. So go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe and click that notification bell so that you will be alerted to new videos. And please share this video with someone who you think might learn from these fundamentals. I'm Kendall Stump, and welcome to the Stump Project. All right, guys, welcome back. Okay, so this week, obviously, as you can see, we're going to be working on a Stormtrooper Lego. I took a canvas. This is an 8x10 canvas, and I sketched on it the figure that we wanted to cover, and you can see I kind of dictated where I wanted my shadows to be, just as a visual reminder, visual cue. And then this is acrylic paint that I just watered down, and I put it all over the canvas in order to tint it. One of the reasons why you might want to do this on top of a pencil sketch is because if you use odorless mineral spirits in your thinning of your paint when you do your initial glaze on your canvas, you can erase your pencil marks, so you might want to preserve it. So you can do that with like a workable fixative. You can spray that on there to help preserve the pencil. In this case, I just put an acrylic wash over top of it, which helps seal that in. So I did that, and I let that dry. And now I put an even coat of liquid. I'm a big proponent of this stuff right here. This helps speed up the drying time of your paint. I'm just impatient, so I like to do that. So now I'm going to use some burnt sienna, and I'm just going to sketch out on top of my pencil marks, because the paint that I have on there, the tone, it's acrylic and it's dry, and it's not going to mix with my paint at all as I put it on. And I want a little bit of that to come through to help make all of my colors homogeneous. So I've just got a little bit, and I'm just going to start here at the top, and I'm just going to go around the outside of my line, and I'll speed this up as I go along, because you get the idea. I don't want to bore you too much. So I've been trying to speed up my videos as we go, and just to try to make them a little bit more digestible for you. If you like that, let me know. If you would rather see them unedited, then well, let me know that too. And what I'm really doing here is I am defining the form. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to touch the shadow of that form. Yes, so I've recently gotten into doing Lego builds, and they're quite fun and addicting. So that's one of the reasons why I thought that this would be kind of a fun exercise. We'll just go in and explore hard surfaces. Hard surfaces have always been a nemesis of mine. I always prefer the organics. That's why I'm drawn to landscapes and stuff. Things can just happen, and you can just let them happen. This is not so much the case. Things are supposed to be a specific way. So we'll see how this turns out. This up here, I'm going to make a little bit darker, because I want to start to attack the shadows now, or the dark areas. Trying to keep my lines fairly straight. Although this is a painting, so there's a little bit of an allowance for creative license. Leaving some of the highlighted areas for a visual cue. And just like we did with the shark, the Jaws poster, I have off to the side, I've got my iPad with a picture of what this is ultimately supposed to look like, so that I have a reference to work from. So it's good to have, it doesn't matter if you're drawing, if you're painting from life or what, even if it's just from your imagination, it's good that you plan these things out if it's at all possible. Okay, some more blacks, and we'll probably, for these blacks, we'll probably end up mixing our own using a mixture of raw umber and ultramarine blue. And you can always go back in later and glaze over top of stuff like this once it's dry. So if you wanted some softer shadows, and I may do that, I'm going to try and put in some shadows, but if I need to accentuate them, or I think I need to push them a little bit more, rather than going on top of wet paint, I'll wait until they dry and I will glaze over top of them. And the reason why I'm putting in some of these marks here, like these are going to be black marks. The majority of the Stormtrooper is obviously going to be white. And I don't want to come in here and just start painting all of these things white and then try to put black on top of it. If I do, if you put dark on top of light colors, your dark colors will get lightened to the point that they're muddy. So try to avoid that when at all possible. Obviously, there are some circumstances where when you want to do that, you can do that. Like if you would decide to do that, and we're going to work on this in stages, then let that white paint dry first. Some of this stuff I know that I'm going to lose, and that's okay. It will mix with the white paint, and it should be some really nice effects. Now, surfaces are a funny thing. Light, everything has a surface. The texture of the surface is what the light reacts with. And that's what gives us our texture. So if you have a smooth surface, then the light's gonna look very, very shiny on it. It's gonna have a lot of highlights. It's not gonna be diffused much. For example, if you have chrome, highly polished, smooth, ultra smooth surface, there's nothing to diffuse that light. So it just looks shiny and smooth. Now, if you have like a brushed metal where you have grinder marks or something like that in there, then those texture surfaces are going to diffuse the light, and it's going to make it look not so shiny and maybe dull. So the texture of the surface matters. So keep that in mind as you are putting together these things, as you're painting the different surfaces. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about a tree or a leaf, as we do in landscapes, dirt on the ground. It doesn't matter. Everything has texture. Again, it's one of those things where, and I've said it before, you need to paint what you see, not what you think you know. Again, I'm just blocking in some of this stuff to help give me a little bit of a visual cue. You don't have to be extremely accurate with how you want everything to be, but I mean, it definitely helps. Mixed up some black with ultramarine blue and raw umber, mixed with a little bit of titanium white. And I'm going to start with some of these shadows. pay attention to your brush strokes. Wipe off your brush if you need to, and by blending, you can get a nice transition with a clean brush, just going over that line between the two. Don't be afraid to wipe off your brush. I'm going over some of the burnt sienna that I put in, and you knew that I would. Again, we're using this to bring out some of the homogeneousness of the colors. We want them all to be able to go together and just blend seamlessly. And you can see that this isn't just white that I'm putting up there, it's picking up all that undercolor. And so the white becomes not a flat white, but this has more of a pinky hue to it because of the umber, sienna. And then have both of those areas in. I wiped off my brush, and then just softly smooth that out just a little bit. And again, I'm going to leave a little dark spot there. That's going to remind me to come back in with some black later on. I'm going to let this dry, and then I will come back in later on with some black detail. Not everything can be done a la prima. I mean, you can do a lot, but not everything. This is a rigger brush, just using it for some highlights along the edges. Just working as we go, kind of defining the shape and the form. And switch back and forth between your brushes too. I mean, if you need a smaller brush, grab a smaller brush. And bounce around from part to part on your painting. Don't feel that you're, just because you moved on to another part, that you're committed. Sometimes you need to let the paint set up a little bit. It doesn't take too long. And I'm just using a paper towel. I'm just wiping off my brushes every now and again. Just to keep the residue on there. It just helps to pull your painting together, because blacks aren't blacks, whites aren't white. There's different hues and colors and even values. This warm shadow that comes right here. And use your brushes. I mean, this flat brush, if you turn it sideways, you can see you have a nice thin point. You get a chiseled edge. You can use that as a small area, or cover a lot of area if you use the flat side of it. Okay, and now for the highlight parts, it's a lighter shadow, really. So I'm using that same darker shadow, and I applied some titanium white to it. But against, and this is important, against the darker, it looks much lighter. But if you put this against a light area, it would look much darker. So that goes to demonstrate how you need the dark to show the light, and vice versa. Sometimes you want to make transitions, sometimes you don't. So if there's a hard edge or a corner, you probably don't want to make a transition there. Now you might soften it. Obviously you don't want a razor's edge. There's nothing outside of a highly machined surface that you can get any kind of a visual razor's edge to, but your transitions will vary. You know what I mean by transition, is how the light and the dark fade off from one another. For example, right here on the nose area, this part right here, it's a little bit of a smoother transition. So I'm just going to stroke and blend that in and let that fall off so that it's nice and smooth. Just keep working it back and forth until I'm happy with how that just falls off. And it shows the reflected light, the bounced light. And then this area that's right underneath it, this area right here, is much less of a transition because it's more of a hard edge. It's a curved area in that helmet. Pay attention to the direction of the surfaces. If your surface has a curve to it, make sure that you're painting on there has a curve on it as well. And to put on the highlights on the dark areas, you just keep blending in a little bit. Just go right over top of that dark and just blend it. Just keep stroking and it will blend in with the color underneath it. If you think you put it on too dark or too light, or you think you put the light on a little bit heavy on the dark areas, then just keep brushing it and it will blend in with the color underneath it. If it still doesn't work, just wipe off your brush, go back into your dark on top of that white, and that definitely will fade it out. It won't get nearly as dark as what it was. So I decided to go over this a little bit. Let's see if I can pull out. And I can always darken this up later. You see how this stroke here is more curved along the idea of the helmet, the surface structure of the helmet. That's what I was talking about. So pay attention to how your surface flows. mixing on the canvas, putting on the dark color that you know that it is, and then adding some highlights to it. Once it's on there, helps it take on its natural, or something that's more akin to a natural highlight. And then lastly, I want you to keep in mind too, you're working on, you're balancing back and forth between value. We've talked about value many times. You have to keep it in mind if you want things to read. So dark things need to be dark, light things need to be light, and you don't necessarily want them next to each other. So you keep that in mind in photography, you keep that in mind in composition. There has to be a contrast between your objects, your forms, and that's just how things are in nature. That's how we can see, is through value, light and contrast. So when we go to put in the background, what we'll do, and we'll do this, work on this before I call this video done for today. You use light against dark. So we'll use some kind of a mid-tone color here, a little on the darker side. This also allows you to clean up the edges. On the darker side, we'll use a lighter color. Then there are some areas like this through here, you may want to use what's called a lost edge. And that's where the colors are or the value is pretty much so consistent that it's hard to define what it is, where the background starts and the subject begins, or the background ends and the subject begins. You see that right there? It just kind of blended right off, and then you have these spots like this right up here where you start to make a transition. So then your background will make this transition as well. And then the closer you get to the edges of your painting, go ahead and make those darker. Blend out brush strokes as you need to. And there you have a pretty good idea on how to do hard surfaces. Keep your brush strokes smooth. Use the light to help define the edges. Use the value, highlights and shadows to help define the surface direction. And I will post this when I get this done. I will post it on my social media, on my Instagram and Twitter. If I happen to come across something that would be of value to you outside of the things that we've already talked about, I will be sure to post it. I may post the glazing when I get to the glazing part. You can use everything we've covered to date to build on each other and really create something special. Hard surfaces can have smooth transitions or rough ones. Neither way is wrong or right. It's all according to your style. But light will tell the story of the texture on the surface that you're painting. If you want to see something special or have a question, drop me a line in the comments to let me know. So keep studying, keep practicing, and go on and create something awesome. You can find inspiration anywhere. Don't be afraid to look. I'll see you next time.